So today we have Peggy Dylan with us, who is talking to us about firewalking all the way from California. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Kay. Really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us all about firewalking, which is one of my favourite things. Can you tell me, because I always think of you as being one of the first people to bring firewalking to prominence in the West. Would you say that's an accurate thing to
Yes,
say?
people call me the mother of firewalking, which I sort of like, though I must say that I might be the mother of firewalking, but I have many ancestors. That firewalking's been around for thousands of years. The oldest recorded firewalk was over 4,000 years ago in India. And people have firewalked in India and Sri Lanka. The pre-Buddhist Tibetans firewalked, the Bön, and to this day still firewalk in certain rituals to protect crops. There's also firewalking in Africa. As a matter of fact, maybe later on we'll talk about the African firewalking because I consider them the master firewalkers.
Cool.
The Celts firewalked. There's historic firewalking in pre-Roman times in Italy. The Vikings firewalked, walking on hot chains, supposedly. Leave it to the Vikings to go from sweet hot coals to metal. When the missionaries got to North America, the Native Americans were firewalking. And interestingly enough, the Native Americans firewalked for the same reasons we do. To this day, they firewalk both for healing, for emotional, spiritual, or even physical healing, or to gather power for external achievements. For them, of course, it was either war or most likely the hunt. But to gather power for external movement or to take that power in for personal healing. Firewalking in the Hawaiian Islands and in Fiji and Thailand, Japan. All over this little globe, people have firewalked. So when people call me the mother of firewalking, it means that I was the original voice in the Western world for this ancient practice, but the practice was not born with me.
Mm. And you talked about there some of the things that we would use it for. It kind of reminds me a little bit because my background is in, before I came to shamanic practice, my background is in Wicca and witchcraft, and we would do sort of fire magics to bring power and energy to particular outcomes, just like you were saying there. And this is a much more, this is not candle magic, is it? This is really quite fearful stuff, I find. I was very frightened the first time that I firewalked. So why is that something that will raise energy to make something happen or to create healing?
Well, first of all, let's describe it for listeners who haven't done this before. You build a large fire, about a cubic yard in size, and light it. So that's a big fire. But then you let it burn down to coals, and the coals get raked out into a path. In our culture, usually a path, though some cultures make it a circle. But in our culture, we developed a path because we're very goal-oriented. And so we have a tendency to like to go from point A to point B, whether it's from being ill to being healed, or from being sad to being happy, or from being unenlightened to being enlightened. We like to have a goal and move towards that goal. Mm-hmm. And so the firewalk as a path is very demonstrative of that movement. And so you rake the fire into a path that's usually about 3 feet wide and somewhere between 9 and 12 feet long. So that you have this red carpet of coals that we're walking on. And so when Kay talks about it being fearful, you can imagine a carpet of coals that's somewhere between 9 and 12 feet long, and you're putting your tender feet on this fire, not once, but in numerous steps across it. And so it is fear-inducing, But if we honestly look at anything that we do that pushes our boundaries, pushes our envelope, there's always that element of fear, that element of, I don't know how to do this, I've never done this before, and then a sense of astonishment at our capacities. And to me, that's the beauty of the Firewalk, is we do not understand, collectively, the human race, do not understand what makes firewalking possible. There is a capacity that resides within us that allows this capacity to surface. And it only surfaces when we step forward. Suddenly, we have this capacity to do this. And there's all kinds of ideas of what makes it possible, but what really is happening physiologically has not been established yet. Which is, for me, is part of the beauty of it. For me, the magic of the universe is that there's still mystery and magic out there. That our human brains can't know all the magic and the great mystery. We get to explore it, enjoy it, love it, but we can never know it.
I was going to ask you about it because whenever I talk about firewalking, because you know I love it, people always say, well, first of all, they say, do you burn your feet? And I say, yeah, sometimes, a little bit. But people ask, what makes it possible? And they say there must be some kind of law of physics that means that we're not, about the way that we tread on them that makes it possible. And I've never found anything that adequately explains that. So it's nice for me to hear you say that, we don't really know.
Yeah, the closest explanation I've come is from that African tribe I talked about. And they're master firewalkers. Their tribe has used the Firewalk since its inception, its beginning, they say, that firewalking is part of their ritual. And they do stuff with the fire I forbid people in my groups to do. They rub the coals on their bodies, slither through the coals on their bellies. We Westerners are just baby firewalkers. I'm quite content if I can walk across those coals, slithering on my belly, maybe my next incarnation. And this tribe from the Kalahari Desert in Southeast Africa says that what makes firewalking possible is when our num, N-U-M, is equal to the num of the fire. Then we can cross that fire unharmed. And the closest translation that I've come to the word num is energy. When our human energy equals the energy of the fire, we cross that fire unharmed. And the beauty of the word num, what I love about it, is the fact that they don't put a distinction on it. Joy is num, love is num, but fear is num also. That any energy you have in your body will elevate your energetic system to where you can walk on those coals unharmed. And that is really the key to life. And that's the Firewalk I call a clinic for living. Because the key to life is, can I generate the energy and bring the focused mind to this task? Whether it's writing a book, whether it's raising healthy children, whether it's making a marriage work. It doesn't matter what it is. But can I raise my enthusiasm, my joy, my energy, bring it behind a focused intent? What is the image I'm wanting? What is it I'm wanting to create in this situation? Bring my energy behind it and allow it to manifest. And the Firewalk teaches us in a very short amount of time how to do that. The energy comes into the body, and sometimes it's fear. Doesn't matter what the energy source is. It's energy, and then with a focused mind, and in Firewalking, the desired result is very obvious. To be on the other side, feeling joyously alive and aligned with the universe and understanding in greater detail what we're all about here. And doing that in a joyful way. And so, Kay, you mentioned the little burns people get sometimes.
Yeah, fire kisses.
Fire kisses, we like to call them. Exactly, fire kisses, because that's really what they are. They're little treats that the fire leaves on your physical form for a few hours usually. And if you think of acupressure, okay, so let's say you're having stomach problems, that will be reflected on a point on your foot. We all know that our feet reflect our body's emotion. We know that our body reflects our energetic system. Our energetic system reflects our mental holding. And so, let's say I'm having difficulty digesting the way my sister treated me. Okay? But I'm not really looking at it and consciously processing it. So my stomach starts getting upset about this. I go to a fire walk, but I haven't been willing to look at the fact that my sister was nasty to me. And so that unresolved energy is being processed through my body. It is reflected on my foot. I walk on the fire. That point, all my energy moves except the point on my body that has to do with my stomach. I get a little fire kiss there, and the energy for the next couple hours or the next couple minutes sometimes, that heat continues to work that point, speeding up the process in my stomach, speeding up the process in my emotions, and releasing the energy that I had blocked around my sister. And suddenly the solution comes to me at the end of the fire walk of, all I have to do is love her a little bit more and she'll be okay. She was just having a bad day, or whatever it is. And it came because the num or the chi or the prana, whatever you call that energy that runs through everything, got intensified at the point where I was not allowing it to process. And so then it processes through. Firewalking fire is a healer. And so those little burns are not negatives, or they're not commands that I did something wrong. They're little gifts from the universe to heal something that's not vibrating as beautifully and as highly as it could in my life.
That's a nice description of it. And I always look at, like foot reading charts, or because it's like reflexology, right? They say that we know that it's all tied into the body, and see where my little blisters are. But
exactly.
Even if they feel really bad, when I wake up in the morning, they're always gone.
Yeah, it's actually really remarkable that some of the ones that you go, oh, I've really done it this time, within a few hours, as you say, after you go to sleep, they're by morning they're gone, because the energy is processed through. In Chinese medicine, they use the heat on meridian points to stimulate the healing, and the fire is the great healer and does the same thing. And so sometimes you don't even know what got healed; it just got healed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like, just to go back to something you said a little while ago, you were saying that it's about having your num at the same level as the num of the fire. I do hear other people who firewalk in a very different way than I have, talking about mind over matter and persuading themselves that the fire is not hot, and kind of convincing themselves that what they're walking over isn't hot. Do you think that that's part of the same sort of tradition, or do you think it's a completely different approach?
I think it's a completely different approach. It was brought in by Anthony Robbins. He was trained by us in 83, but his primary interest was NLP. And he used the firewalk to demonstrate some of his NLP principles of the mind control and mind over matter in this case. And it was very interesting. I think it was the late 80s, could have been early 90s. An independent researcher looked at the two methodologies. One I would call our approach is more mind with matter, maybe.
Yeah.
Instead of mind over matter. And she found that there were many fewer burns with our method. That in general, denial doesn't work. This isn't hot, my mind can do this. In general in life, denial doesn't work. Sometimes it will for a while. But in general, it won't work. I mean, the reality is you look at hot coals, they're hot.
Yeah.
And saying that they're not hot isn't going to change that. It'll change it for some people, but for most of us, we're realistic. They're hot coals. And so, when I have a problem in my life, I like to face it head on. Saying this isn't a problem won't make it go away. What makes it go away is looking at it and saying, how can I bring my heart, my love, my intelligence to this problem to cause a change?
Yeah.
And that's sort of what we do with the Firewalk. But what I'd like to say to the listeners is, if there is an Anthony Robbins Firewalk near you, or anyone who does it in that way, getting near hot coals is amazing in any way you do it. I mean, I don't want to deny the value that people get from that too, because like Stephen Mulhern from Lendrick Lodge, he first walked with Anthony Robbins. And he felt that there was something lacking because he was looking for the spiritual component, because that's his inclination, but he still got tremendous value from it.
Yeah, and it's not everybody's inclination, of course. Like, some people would never walk on fire if it was always going to be presented in the way that you do, because that's about spirituality.
Yes, exactly. And, again, if you look at the planet, people have firewalked for thousands of years, before airplanes, before internet. And every ritual, from Tibet, it was very different than it was in Africa. In Africa, it's very different than it was in Fiji. There's plenty of space within the Firewalk for human creativity to create value in it. Yeah. And so the Firewalk itself is just remarkable and ancient and beautiful. And so what I would say is, to any of the listeners, if you're going to go to a Firewalk, fall in love with the fire. It doesn't really matter what the human is saying around it. It's the fire that gives the gift.
Yeah, it's the fire that's the teacher. And when you were talking about the building of the large fire, every Firewalk that I've been to, that's been a huge part of the ceremony. It hasn't been that you show up and the fire's already been built, and so we've all got to put our intentions for the walk into the fire before it's even lit. Putting it in with the wood. Is it an important part of the ceremony for you? Everybody building the fire.
It's a lovely part of the ceremony, and frequently it can't be done that way.
Yeah.
And so I've released my attachment to letting everyone participate. It's my favorite way to do it, is when everyone can participate. But sometimes it can't be done. For example, where we do the trainings here in California, it's a long walk from the seminar room to the fireside. And I have big groups, 100 people or something. And by the time all those folks got their coats on, we walked down the hill, we built the fire, we walked back up. It'd be time to go back down again.
Yeah.
And so I always have my staff light the fire. And so, but I agree with you, Kay, that whenever possible, it's just lovely to be part of the creation. I always think of the fire before it's lit as building the temple. And then the flame is the bringing the spirit into that temple. And then when we walk, it's like entering the temple. We get to go and participate in that energy. And so it's lovely when we can construct the temple together as a group.
Yeah, only possible in smaller groups, I suppose, and in certain locations. But I do really love that. But I'm a really fiery person. I like to be there for all aspects of the fire if I can. And there are people who come along to firewalks. Certainly I've been on some with bigger groups particularly, where people have elected not to actually walk on the fire but still be part of the circle. Do you think there's healing that still can be gained from that?
Absolutely. In that, I keep coming back to this African tribe because I really think that they have mastered firewalking in a way we're just beginning to explore. But in their tribe, not everyone walks, but everyone gets healed. because it doesn't have to do with walking on the coals. It has to do with the energy that's moving in the collective. And as people walk, more and more energy moves through the whole group. And so even those that aren't walking can feel that movement and that healing happening. The objective of firewalking is not like bungee jumping, where you build up a personal desire to overcome a fear, and then you do it, and then you celebrate by yourself. The purpose of firewalking is this collective chi, or this collective nom, that it creates a healing energy for everyone involved. And so it doesn't matter if you walk or not. I mean, most people do because it's delightfully fun, but you get healed. And also, it's like the reason movies work, the reason watching the Olympics work, is because when we see things, our body responds as if we do it. And so it's when you see other people firewalking, your body gets the high, gets the chi, the nom. And it's that energy that creates the healing for the physical, emotional, and spiritual self, and the sense of wonder and awe at the beauty of this amazing world we get to live in.
And it's the same with a lot of the preparation for firewalking, with like arrow breaking and things like that to help build energy up. When you watch someone else do it, or someone who's particularly scared of walking on the fire, you're all tense and you're like, come on, you can do it. And then when they do, it is cheering like a crowd in a stadium or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we become unified, and so anyone's breakthrough becomes our breakthrough.
Yeah.
It's absolutely lovely. Yeah, and I added those other preparatory challenges or preparatory exercises just for that purpose. It makes it easier to firewalk afterwards because people have already had a breakthrough experience within the seminar room. Even if not everyone does it, it's still that sense of the impossible being possible comes closer.
So what changed for you when you first started doing firewalking? I mean, something must have happened to make you fall completely in love with it so that you could become the mother of firewalking.
I had a spontaneous enlightenment experience when I was 12, following my sister's death when I was 11. That death, I was very close to her, and it put me into a psycho-spiritual crisis that caused me to go on this internal quest as a very young person. And then at age 12, I had this enlightenment experience that showed me that all of creation is the expression of the Creator, or of God, as I called it back then. And so my whole life was about exploring that expression. Okay, so I'm 12 years old. I'm still having to learn math and French and go to school, and I have to start dealing with my hormones. And, life as a young woman is happening for me. And at the same time, I'm part of this amazing experience of being this creative expression that nobody, I had this when I was living in Switzerland. I grew up in Switzerland. And nobody in my environment comprehended that perspective. Had I been born in India, it might have been different, or with the Native American tribes. But living in a Western world, my father was a scientist. There was no comprehension of the experiences I was having on a psychic level, on a spiritual level. Then when I was 15, we moved to the States, and I started working with a teacher from India, and that was an amazing relief. Here was someone who comprehended what I was going through, and comprehended that yes, as human beings, we can do this. We can live in human form and have spiritual awareness. simultaneously, because he did. And he was the first human being I had ever met that walked in both worlds. But in all of that, there was still a sense of, I'm in human reality. I'm in human intellectual reality. When am I going to hit enlightenment? When am I going to get there? What do I have to do to be there permanently? There was this yearning, this push for enlightenment. And I did all kinds of different experiences in the States, from meditation retreats to EST. I did the breathwork certification training. I just threw myself onto the path in every way I could. And when I walked on fire the first time, it was led by Tali Burkan, and he was the first person doing it in the West. And he swore people to secrecy, because firewalking had always been a secret practice. And so he swore people to secrecy. And when I walked with him, I got halfway across the fire, and something in me clicked. Something in me changed so dramatically. It was a realization that as a physical human being, this was impossible. Fire and flesh do not work together in this way, but spirit and fire do. And I suddenly realized that within this ancient practice, there is the potential of reaching beyond our human comprehension and living in the body a moment of getting the fact that we're beyond the body. That was the doorway. And that doorway allowed incredible transformation. That doorway says, what do you want out of life? Anything's possible. What do you want? What do you want to touch on? Where are you going in your life? And so for me, it was a stunning moment of realization that it's not from where I am grasping towards something in the future, but this moment is the moment of connection with the divine. Every moment is. It's not sometime in the future. It's this moment, and this moment, and this moment, and this moment. And so I just said, with this powerful ritual available, we have to make this public. Tali Burkan and I were in relationship at the time that I firewalked. He had learned it from a woman who was studying with a Tibetan master. And I just said, we can't keep this secret. We need to get this out there into the world. Because my whole focus has been human transformation, because individually we can only go as far as we collectively are going. And so my whole thing was transformation of humanity. And so I said, let's get this out there. People need to know this. They need to feel that moment of capacity to move toward where their heart desires. And so we started the firewalking movement after I firewalked.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you did not keep that vow of secrecy very well, Peggy.
No, I talked him into seeing my perspective.
And rightly so, because through you run a lot of firewalks and train people in how to run firewalks themselves through Sundoor. How many people would you guess? Could you guess how many people have firewalked through that movement?
I have no way of even estimating that, because we have hundreds of trainers around the world who are leading their own walks.
Yeah.
We're a very loose association. I hear about different walks happening, everywhere from Dubai to India, to Australia,
I mean, we're talking about, we're not talking about hundreds of people. We're talking about from thousands of people, surely.
hundreds of thousands, probably even into the millions of people who have firewalked, because it's just, well, it's like fire goes, huh?
Yeah.
Spreads.
Spreads.
And when you find something that has power and beauty and relevance in a very real way, people want to experience it.
Yeah.
And again, for your listeners, I want to give you the image. You have this path of fire. You have a group of beautiful people standing around it. Often have drums playing, and people are singing or chanting. And the firewalk often starts quite slowly with people going across one at a time, but then it gets more and more joyful as people realize, oh, this is fantastic that you cross the coals and all you get is an energy rush of delight, of joy, of exuberance, and disbelief, because you've just crossed 12 feet of coals and your feet feel great. And then people start dancing on the coals and skipping on the coals and holding hands and making chains. And it gets more and more joyous and in some ways more and more primal. And that is the real way, like in the traditional societies, the firewalks are full of joy and primal aliveness. They're not this sort of stilted Western, cross the coals one at a time. It's really a joyous celebration of human unification with the divine. And in the highest, in my view, in the highest firewalks, that's really what happens. The collective starts feeling that divine joy in its creation. And that's we've talked about the individual speeding up our energies to create personal healing. But when our energies get very, very high, that's when we can connect with that high vibration that's the divine. And when that starts moving through a group, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And the fire keeps feeding that energy, and the group gets more and more joyous and healed and attuned through that joy.
Yeah, it is such a joyful thing. I can really see when you're describing that, just an image of when I firewalked with you last year, and the whole group at one point was, including you, all dancing across the fire, all of us together. Yeah. I don't even know how I was linked to everybody while also drumming, and everyone was singing and chanting and dancing. It was just amazing, and it's a whole group. It's you wouldn't have thought there was any fire on the ground. People were just skipping around as though we were running through grass or something.
Yeah, well, like that tribe says, when the human noom is equal to the noom of the fire, we cross it unharmed. And so at a certain point, the human noom is higher than the noom of the fire. And so then it's like crossing grass or anything, because the human energy is such a swirl of exuberance and play and joy, that the fire just becomes something that feeds that joy. There's no longer a sense of danger or even the possibility of burns, because we can collectively feel that our noom is higher than the noom of the fire.
What's your favourite? That's probably my favourite personal firewalking memory, but I haven't done it that often. Not as often as I would like. I would like to do it every week. I would like one in my garden, but that is not a possibility, sadly. What's for you have been some of the most powerful experiences and the transformations? Because like for you, obviously you were talking about your personal enlightenment. That's a massive shift that changed the direction of your whole life, but you must see lots of people having moments of real change after a firewalker. Are there any that kind of stick out? Any amazing healings or transformations?
Well, there's one, for some reason when you were talking, it's not really transformation, but it's such a brilliant moment. In traditional societies, kids don't firewalk until they're 7. And so we've sort of adopted that within Sundoor, that there has to be a limit. There has to be a time. And so 7 is when we get our adult teeth. it's the end of the first cycle and the beginning of the second cycle. It's a fabulous time to make it available for kids to firewalk. And Amber, my youngest daughter, had firewalked before she was 7, but most of the time she didn't. She would watch it and she would clap and sing. But when she was 7, we were doing an instructor's training up in the Swiss Alps, and she was with me. And she just caught the bug. And during that training, we do a firewalk where people cross the fire many, many times. And she just went nuts out there. She had just had her 7th birthday in May, and this was July. And she was doing cartwheels across the fire, and she was dancing across the fire. And she just went and went and went. And afterwards, we were in our little room together, and I said, Amber, you were nuts out there. Didn't you get burned, honey? And she goes, oh, yeah, but it was worth it.
At 7.
7. And that perspective of throwing herself into life, and yes, occasionally there will be burns. Occasionally there will be, a painful experience that comes from something, but in the long run, it's worth it. That has marked her whole adult life. She has thrown herself into life in such a remarkable, remarkable way. And I'm certain that it was that firewalk that taught her that the end result, even though that sometimes there's a small detriment, the end result is worth the effort. And so that when you were talking about it, that's what came to mind was that, and for me, of course, very personal and something I've been able to observe. She's now, it's 20 years later now in her life. And she still grabs life with that same sense of enthusiasm and courage.
What a joyful thing to have that, available to you as such a young child, to sort of shape your thinking in a different way than a lot of people are. I mean, when I was 7, I hadn't heard of it at all, of course. Like, it just wasn't something that people were, I suppose still now there's a lot of people who don't know what it is. And, particularly I live in a very urban place, and I grew up in London, and people don't know about this stuff in the cities and things. And I think actually it's probably where it's most needed, isn't it?
I'm not sure if it's more. I think all human beings need that vital connection with the elements, with all of them. And so I'm not sure if it's more needed. I think it's needed everywhere. I was just thinking about Stephen Mulhern's little girl, because she's my godchild, and we made her wait, and it was seriously, we made her wait. She wanted to start walking when she was 4 or 5, and we said, no, you wait until you're 7, and it was so great. Her statement after her first walk when she was 7 was, firewalking's not hard. What's hard is overcoming the fear to do it.
At 7.
At 7. Unbelievable self-analysis, huh?
Yeah.
I think we can trust this next generation coming along.
I think so. That is pretty amazing. That is amazing. My first firewalk, I was just petrified. I was so scared. I didn't think I was going to be able to walk it. And I didn't think I would be scared, because I love fire, and it's an element that I feel is the easiest one for me to connect into. And then the first firewalk that I did was with Stephen Mulhern up at Lendrick, and I did the arrow breaking thing first. That totally threw me into a spin of like total terror. And even though I did it, when I went down, it really brought something up in me, like a really fearful thing. And I wasn't able to walk across the fire by myself, and one of my dear friends just took my hand and was like, come on. So the first time I walked across the fire was actually with someone else, and that was what kind of gave me the ability to overcome the fear to do it.
And what was your experience after walking?
Oh, well, I loved it. I was leaping up and down. I was like, it's brilliant. Get me back around. I want to walk across the fire again. And,
Yeah.
I spent the whole rest of the night walking across it as often, as many times as I could. And I was really sad when it was over. But it shifted a lot of fear for me, and I started changing a lot of things. It moved a lot of restrictive perceptions for me, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Mm.
That moving of restrictive perceptions, because so much of what we do in life when we don't follow our dreams is due to perceptions about ourselves or about reality. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. They'll make fun of me if I succeed. Whatever it is. And so the removal of those perceptions suddenly frees up so much energy and so much sense of capacity and more fun in the dance. And so that's lovely to hear that it did that for you.
It did, and there was just this basic thing that you come away with, I think, from firewalking, which is when you're really scared to do something. Same with bungee jumping, actually, because I'm really scared of heights as well. I've done that too, and skydiving. I think it's really good for the soul to do stuff that really terrifies you, because then you sort of then can apply that, I think, to our life outside. Where I can say, well, I'm scared of that, but I was also scared of walking across fire, and I did it, and I felt better. So it enables you to trick your mind into thinking it's okay to be scared.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if it's even a trick, because if you think back to that statement that when our human noom is equal to the noom of the fire, we can get across that fire unharmed. And to some extent, that's the same in everything. That when our noom, when our energy is as high of whatever barrier we're facing, we overcome that barrier. Mm. And so when we translate fear not from fear but into energy in our bodies. This is the energy the universe is feeding us to move forward. Instead of this is fear that's meant to hold us back, it's actually energy to help us move forward when we're facing a big barrier. All we have to do is take action with that energy. And the energy may not feel very pleasant because we're translating it as fear, but it's the energy we need to be successful. Mm. And so it's very effective when we translate that.
Mm. Yep. It's so easy, I think, to forget about that when you've been away from, whether it's the fire or sweat lodge or whatever ceremonies it is that people do to, I like to go and do some of these type of ceremonies to help push me past a certain point when I've been working with my own practice for a while, and then I hit up against something and I just need something big to raise me up and get me over the next kind of, I don't know, hurdle. That's maybe not the right way to say it, but you know what I mean. These are the kind of big ceremonies that I like to do. How do you obviously get the chance to firewalk a lot more often, but how do you try and remember that feeling and those lessons? Because sometimes if you've been away from that kind of ceremony or any kind of ceremony for a while and you're just back in the day-to-day life, sometimes I find that I can forget the strength that I was shown in the firewalk or the lessons that I was taught by the fire.
Well, one thing is I teach, and as you know, that when you teach, you also get the lessons you're teaching. And so that's part of it. But the other is also I have a spiritual practice, and so I have a daily practice. The objective of which is to keep me aligned with my spiritual direction, my spiritual intent, and my sense of well-being. And so that for me is of great importance. Is to have that. I also surround myself everywhere with symbols of that connection, and I nurture that which I want in my life. For example, my relationship. I will not dump anger at on my husband. What will that lead to? what good does that do? That I nurture what it is I'm wanting in my family, in my relationship, in my surroundings. I build an environment that mirrors back my objectives. Also in our personal practices with the environment, with how we live in a harmonious way with the greater world. I don't do things unconsciously. Everything we do, we attempt to be as conscious in everything that we do as we can be, that every expression is an expression of how we want the world to be in the long run. There's a wonderful story about a Native American elder who is with a Catholic priest. And this Native American elder is from the Hopi tribe, and the Hopis were one of the tribes that did the rain dances. And the priest doesn't understand how this is possible, because within Catholicism, prayer doesn't work that way. It doesn't influence the environment. And so the priest is asking the Hopi elder, how do you pray to make the rain come? And the elder sort of looks down and he's trying to figure out, how do I explain this? And finally he looks at the priest and he goes, you don't understand. He says, our life is our prayer. And when we live right, the rains come. Mm-hmm. And so that idea of our life is our prayer is sort of at the core of everything, within Sundoor, within my relationship, within my family, within how we live. And our life is our prayer. So, with the vehicle we drive, what am I praying? What am I praying with this vehicle? With the foods that I eat, what am I praying? When I'm eating organic, I'm praying a certain prayer for the world. And so that's the idea. It's not how do I keep the lesson alive from a specific incident, but how do I keep the lesson alive moment to moment in my life? And how do I build a life that continuously speaks of my prayer for my world?
Oh, every time I talk to you, I just want to cry, Peggy. I love it. It's such a beautiful story and such a good reminder, because it is easy sometimes to forget that each thing that we're doing is a sacred moment.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Get distracted.
Yeah, or it can be a sacred moment. And even the distraction, Kay, can be a sacred moment. If you go, I just need an evening of a just hysterically weird, romantic comedy, just for laughter and just to give my brain a rest. That's a sacred action. Yeah. You're doing it as a gift to yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to be in prayer all the time,
Mm-hmm.
It's really to do things consciously with a conscious intent, because that brings about the result.
Yeah.
And so it's just the most delightful experience when you make a choice that your life's about your spiritual development, because then every moment brings more value. Yeah, it's just, I'm so happy you're playing this game along with me, Kay.
I love the game. I love the game. Oh, thank you so much for talking to us today. I really want to encourage people to do firewalking, because it's just so amazing. But I just, it's wonderful to have an opportunity to have people hear your voice and hear your stories and hear your words, because I really would love people to know that you exist, because my life is better for knowing that. So where can people find out more about you, Peggy?
The easiest way is probably on the internet. My company's name is Sundoor, which is just like it sounds, Sundoor. sundoor.com. And that's probably the easiest way, is sundoor.com. And if you want to send me an email, you can send it to sundoor@sundoor.com, and it always finds me no matter where I am in the world. And I also wanted to thank you, Kay, for doing this work, because every human being that creates more joy in their own lives elevates the human race through that action. And so this is a real gift, not only to your listeners, but to all of humanity. And, collectively, we're going to do this. We're going to create more beauty and joy for humanity, even though when you look out there, it looks a little desperate. It's not. It's getting there.
Oh, thank you, Peggy. I love you so much. You're such a beautiful human being. Oh, wonderful.
Okay, until next time, love.
Until next time.